There's a special kind of dread reserved only for Airbnb hosts. It's the sound of that message notification late at night, where you don't know if you're getting a simple "thank you" or a declaration of war on the laws of physics. Today, we are not talking about dirty floors or a lack of towels. We are talking about complaints that have completely detached from reality. Complaints so bizarre, so profoundly absurd, they make you question everything. We have gathered 55 of the most unhinged complaints ever received by hosts. 1. A host who offered a pet-friendly listing was perplexed by a complaint from a guest who had brought his beloved golden retriever. The issue wasn't with the property, but with the backyard's inhabitants. The guest was furious that the local squirrels were too athletic and boastful. He claimed they would deliberately run up trees and across power lines right in front of his dog, who couldn't catch them. He described this as an act of interspecies taunting and insisted the squirrel's superior agility was giving his dog a profound inferiority complex. He asked the host if there was a way to find less agile squirrels for the dog to chase. 2. Blaming your Airbnb host for the moon being too bright sounds like a joke, right? Well, one guest staying in a desert home with panoramic views demanded a full refund for exactly that. She argued that the host failed to disclose the property's vulnerability to lunar glare and should have provided astronomical-grade blackout curtains. She was legitimately holding the host financially responsible for the Earth's natural satellite. Seriously, what is a host supposed to do? File a complaint with NASA? 3. Some hosts lean into their property's history, advertising it as potentially haunted for fun. One host did this and received a complaint not for a ghostly presence, but for the complete lack of one. The guest was a paranormal enthusiast and was furious that he didn't experience a single spooky event. He demanded a partial refund for the failed haunting, arguing the host had not delivered on the promised supernatural amenities. 4. You'd think knowing how to read an analog clock is a basic life skill, but apparently not for everyone. A tourist in London was profoundly disappointed that the iconic Big Ben clock tower didn't have a digital display. She left a 1-star review because she had to interpret the hands, like some kind of medieval peasant. Her complaint argued that London should upgrade its landmarks to be more user-friendly for modern tourists. At what point does convenience just become helplessness? 5. Offering guests the chance to see local wildlife seems like a guaranteed 5-star feature. A host with a rural cabin was pleased when his guest excitedly reported seeing a deer. The problem arose on day 2, when the same deer appeared again. The guest complained that the wildlife was too repetitive, feeling cheated because he was promised variety, not reruns of the same deer. Apparently, he was expecting a full-blown nature documentary with a fresh cast of characters daily. 6. Sometimes you can do your job too well. A host learned this the hard way after getting a complaint that her apartment was too clean. After a professional cleaning, the guest described the faint scent of lemon as sterile and suspicious, suggesting it felt like the host was trying to cover up a recent crime scene. She would have much preferred a more authentic, lived-in aroma, which I can only assume means she wanted it to smell like old pizza and regret. 7. The Wi-Fi password was Carpe Diem 23. This was, according to the guest, a form of philosophical harassment. He argued that the phrase "seize the day" placed an unreasonable amount of pressure on him to be productive and adventurous during what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation. Every time he had to log on, he felt judged by the network itself. Have we officially reached a point where even a Wi-Fi password can be a microaggression? 8. The host's great-grandmother, long since passed, was apparently still on duty judging guests from beyond the grave. At least, that's what a group staying in a historic home claimed. They filed a complaint that a portrait in the hallway was creepy and judgmental, insisting its eyes followed them and cast a negative vibe on their party. Their demand? The host needed to make a 2-hour drive to either remove the family heirloom or cover it with a sheet. 9. A host who proudly advertised her cottage as a nature retreat found herself in a bizarre dispute over the local avian residence. The guest was furious that the birds began their incessant chirping at sunrise, which he deemed to be an unacceptable hour. His formal complaint demanded the host take immediate action to control the avian noise pollution. Among his suggestions were soundproofing the surrounding forest, or, and this is a real suggestion, reasoning with the birds to adhere to a more guest-friendly schedule. 10. Sometimes, the biggest threats on vacation are found where you least expect them, like the bathroom floor. A guest complained that the repeating geometric pattern on the tiles was hypnotically problematic. He claimed that staring at it while on the toilet induced a mild, trance-like state that made him lose track of time. He was actually late for a dinner reservation because of it and legitimately blamed the mesmerizing power of the floor, demanding compensation for the inconvenience. 11. You can't get much better than a beachfront property, right? The sound of the waves is supposed to be the ultimate relaxation tool. But for one guest, it was a nightmare. She complained to the host that the ocean was excessively loud at night and was disrupting her sleep. She seriously suggested the host should install some kind of soundproofing for the entire coastline, or, at the very least, provide a discount for the aggressive and unrelenting noise made by the planet's tide. 12. A host received an urgent panicked message from a guest at 2 a.m. The emergency? The neighbor's cat was sitting on the rental property's fence. The guest described the cat as menacing and was demanding the host take immediate action to remove the trespassing feline. He wasn't allergic, the cat wasn't making noise, it was just sitting there. He even asked if he could call the police to report it. How exactly do you explain to someone that you don't have jurisdiction over the neighborhood cats? 13. Smoke detectors save lives, but for one guest, they ruin the ambiance. A woman complained that the small, intermittently blinking green light on the bedroom smoke detector was a major sleep disturbance. She wasn't concerned about a malfunction. She was convinced the tiny flash was a rhythmic form of surveillance that was monitoring her dreams. Is this a new level of paranoia, or is there a market for non-judgmental smoke alarms? 14. The beach was beautiful, the water was clear, the sun was shining. Everything was perfect for one vacationing couple, except for one fundamental flaw with the location: the sand. They complained that the sand on the beach was too sandy. Their official complaint elaborated that it was overly grainy and had a nasty habit of getting everywhere, including in their shoes and car. They genuinely felt the host had failed to properly describe the textural challenges of a standard beach. 15. A guest staying in a suburban home with a lovely backyard complained about an unauthorized shadow. A large oak tree on the property was casting a shadow over his preferred sunbathing spot between the hours of 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. He was furious that this daily solar inconvenience wasn't mentioned in the listing. He argued that the host had a responsibility to either trim the tree to his specifications or provide a detailed hour-by-hour solar map of the yard. 16. Here's a complaint that proves some people will find empathy in the strangest places. A guest claimed that the dishwasher in the kitchen sounded profoundly sad and overworked. She wasn't complaining that it was loud or broken. No, she described its whirring and gurgling noises as the melancholic sighs of an unappreciated servant. She felt so guilty running it that she ended up washing all her dishes by hand and suggested the host give the poor appliance a day off. 17. Some complaints are just pure poetry of the absurd. Take the guest who reported that his memory foam mattress had aggressive gravity. It wasn't too firm or too soft. No, his official claim was that the bed was actively and maliciously pulling him down all night, leading to a terrible sleep. His recommendation was for the host to invest in a mattress that showed a basic respect for personal space and, presumably, the laws of physics as this guest understood them. 18. In a rural farmhouse rental, a guest from the city became increasingly paranoid about the neighboring cows. She sent a message to the host, complaining that the cows would just stand in the field and stare at the house for hours. She described the behavior as unsettling and conspiratorial, as if the herd was plotting something. She was genuinely concerned for her safety and asked if the host could do something to make the cows act more normal. 19. Imagine providing a fully stocked gourmet kitchen with brand new appliances, quality cookware, and a full spice rack, only to get a 1-star review. Why? Because the kitchen was missing a melon baller. The guest was outraged that she had to resort to using a regular spoon to scoop out her cantaloupe, an experience she described as primitive and undignified. The absence of this one, highly specific utensil apparently negated every other positive aspect of the property. 20. A guest who booked a penthouse with stunning city views complained that his view was being obstructed by other buildings. He seemed to be under the impression that a city view would be an empty, unobstructed panorama of the horizon, but with skyscrapers. He was legitimately annoyed that other tall buildings were cluttering up his line of sight, and wrote that the host should have been more transparent about the fact that the apartment was, in fact, located in a city. 21. The gentle glow of a refrigerator light is a beacon for midnight snackers everywhere. But for one guest, it was a spotlight of shame. He complained that the fridge's internal light was too bright and interrogational. He claimed that every time he opened the door for a slice of cheesecake, the sudden, intense light made him feel like he was being questioned in a police drama, effectively judging his late-night dietary choices and ruining the snack. 22. As a nice decorative touch, a host placed a beautiful, realistic-looking bowl of wax fruit on the dining room table. A few days into the stay, they received an irate message from the guest. Assuming it was a complimentary snack, the guest had bitten directly into a wax apple, nearly chipping a tooth. This wasn't just a mistake on her part. Oh no, this was a deliberate act of trickery by the host. She filed a formal complaint for what she termed culinary deception and accused the host of creating a hazardous environment with a fruit-based booby trap. 23. A guest became utterly fixated on a simple kitchen appliance, the toaster. His complaint wasn't that it burned the toast or didn't work. It was that the spring mechanism was unnecessarily violent. He claimed it launched his morning bagel with such force that it would often fly out of the toaster and land on the counter, sometimes even the floor. He described this daily event as an act of culinary aggression and complained about the breakfast-related startle reflex he had developed. 24. While safety is a top priority, this guest's concern was on another level entirely. She complained that the main staircase leading to the second-floor bedroom had too many individual steps. She didn't argue the stairs were steep or narrow. Her issue was with the sheer quantity of steps, which she found mentally and physically exhausting to navigate each day. Her official recommendation in the review was for the host to seriously consider investing in a small residential escalator. 25. Sometimes the problem isn't the rental at all, but rather the person looking back in the mirror. One guest sent an angry message complaining that the bathroom mirror was unflatteringly honest. He insisted that the combination of the bright overhead lighting and the specific angle of the mirror made him look visibly older and significantly more tired, which had a profoundly negative impact on his vacation self-esteem. He literally blamed the host's choice of reflective surfaces for his bad mood all week. 26. Staying next to a historic church in a quaint European village sounds idyllic, right? Not for one guest, who found a critical flaw in the ambiance. She complained that the hourly church bells were a source of constant stress because her personal watch was 2 minutes fast. Every time the bells rang, it was a loud, jarring reminder that her own timepiece was inaccurate, creating what she called a profound sense of chronological dissonance. How is a host supposed to negotiate with a 300-year-old bell tower? 27. A host who left a couple of complimentary bottles of water as a thoughtful welcome gift was shocked to receive a formal complaint about the gesture. The guest wrote that he exclusively drinks a specific, high-alkaline artesian spring water and considered the perfectly normal bottled water provided to be basically just tap water in a plastic costume. He felt the offering was a genuine insult to his highly refined palate. 28. Interior design is always subjective, but this guest took her analysis to a bizarre psychological level. She complained that the master bedroom, which was painted a calming shade of light blue, was emotionally manipulative. She claimed the color was so soothing it actually made her feel introspectively sad, causing her to reflect on past life failures instead of enjoying her trip. She strongly suggested the host repaint with a more emotionally neutral color. 29. Ever heard of the paradox of choice? One guest experienced it firsthand and decided it was entirely the host's fault. He lodged a complaint that the premium cable package, which featured over 500 channels, consistently induced decision paralysis. He spent so much time endlessly scrolling through the infinite options each night that he never actually watched anything, which he said ruined his evenings. He would have much preferred a TV with just 5 or 6 basic, pre-selected channels. 30. This complaint isn't about the property, but about the host's face. After a smooth and friendly check-in, the guest lodged a complaint that the host did not smile as much in person as in her Airbnb profile picture. This perceived lack of cheerfulness made the whole interaction feel inauthentic and emotionally misleading. The guest felt she was promised a host with a certain high level of visible joy that simply wasn't delivered upon her arrival, framing it like a bait and switch. 31. Some things are literally out of a host's control, like the very air we breathe. One guest, staying in a downtown apartment, complained that the oxygen quality in the bedroom was poor. Not that it was dusty or smelly, but that the air itself felt secondhand and uninspired. His official feedback suggested the host should install an artisan air filtration system to provide a more crisp and motivational breathing experience, as if he was expecting the air to come with a motivational quote. 32. In a beautifully decorated living room, a host had placed a classic ship in a bottle on the mantelpiece. A guest became deeply distressed by it, filing a complaint that the decoration gave her profound existential dread. She argued that seeing the tiny, perfectly crafted ship trapped inside the glass was a metaphor for her own life, and she couldn't relax knowing it would never reach the sea. She demanded the host either free the ship by breaking the bottle or remove the deeply pessimistic art piece. 33. This might be a first. A guest complained about the host's name. The host, an Irish woman named Siobhan, received a message from her guest, a man named Bill, saying her name was needlessly complex and stressful. He claimed that the mental effort required to remember how to pronounce it correctly was a constant source of anxiety during his stay. His recommendation was for the host to consider using a simpler, more intuitive alias for her English-speaking guests. 34. Ever thought about the emotional impact of a key? This guest did. She complained that the front door key was aesthetically displeasing and spiritually dissonant. It wasn't that it was hard to use, she just didn't like its shape or the way it felt in her hand, claiming it had an aggressive energy. She was genuinely upset that she had to interact with this unergonomic and visually offensive piece of metal multiple times a day. At what point does personal preference become a certifiable problem? 35. A listing for a charming home proudly advertised scenic hill views. A guest was furious to discover that to get those views, the house was in fact on a hill. She complained that the walk to the local village was downhill, which was fine, but the walk back was, shocker, uphill. She was outraged that the host had failed to mention the return journey's gravitational challenge and blamed him for the physical exertion she had to endure. 36. For most people, the sound of wind rustling through trees is the essence of a peaceful retreat. For one guest, however, it was an auditory assault. He complained that the wind was musically untalented, producing a sound he described as unstructured, mournful, and frankly, a little depressing. It was apparently having a severe negative effect on his creative energy. His earnest suggestion to the host was to strategically plant different types of trees that might produce a more harmonious and uplifting wind-based symphony. 37. Leaving a welcome basket is a nice touch, but for one guest, it was a source of deep psychological torment. He complained that the basket, which contained artisanal cheeses, crackers, a small bottle of wine, and chocolates, had a total of 7 items. The odd number, he claimed, offended his sense of order and symmetry so profoundly that it created subconscious chaos, preventing him from settling into the property. He would have been perfectly happy if the host had just added one more cracker. 38. One of the perks listed for a charming cottage was the presence of the host's friendly golden retriever, who lived on the property. A guest became extremely unsettled by the dog, not because it barked or jumped, but because of the way it looked at her. She wrote in her review that the dog had a deeply sarcastic gaze and seemed to be mocking her vacation choices every time she walked past. She felt so judged by the dog that it ruined the entire trip. 39. Superstition is a powerful force, as one host discovered. His guest, who was from China, complained that the house's address number, 413, was catastrophically unlucky. He explained that the number 4 sounds like the word for death in his native language, while 13 is notoriously unlucky in Western culture. The combination, he argued, created a doubly cursed property, and the host was negligent for not disclosing the home's negative numerical energy in the listing. 40. A guest found a reason to be offended before she even arrived at the property. While reading her host's bio on the Airbnb app, she saw that he was an ultra-marathon runner. She filed a pre-arrival complaint that this information made her feel lazy and inadequate by comparison. This, she argued, tainted her upcoming vacation with a sense of aspirational pressure, and she felt the host was indirectly shaming her for her more relaxed lifestyle. 41. Some complaints have absolutely nothing to do with the rental property itself. A host was stunned to get a message from a guest complaining about the host's personal car, a sensible, family-friendly minivan parked in his own driveway. The guest's issue? The color, a muted beige, was uninspired and emotionally draining. He claimed that seeing the sad-colored vehicle every morning negatively impacted the overall vacation aesthetic and subtly lowered the tone of the entire neighborhood. 42. A host who invested in premium, high thread count Egyptian cotton towels thought she had covered all the bases for a luxury experience. She was wrong. A guest complained that while the towels were soft, they were insufficiently absorbent on a molecular level. The guest, a woman who took her post-shower routine very seriously, argued that the towels merely relocated the water across her skin instead of truly capturing it. She suggested the host research materials with a better hydrodynamic profile. 43. This has to be one for the history books, or rather, the lack of them. A guest did some research on the property's location and was furious to discover that the land had no significant historical events associated with it. He complained that the property was historically insignificant, lacking any dramatic battles, famous past residents, or notable intrigue. He genuinely felt cheated out of the chance to stay somewhere with more narrative weight. At what point did a relaxing vacation require a historical pedigree? 44. We live in an age where even punctuation can cause an international incident. A host received a complaint from a younger guest who was deeply offended by the host's texting style. The host, a man in his 50s, had a habit of ending his informational texts with a period. The guest claimed this was a form of digital passive aggression that made the host seem curt and dismissive. He was genuinely upset by the unfriendly and finalized tone of a simple full stop. 45. Pillows are a common point of feedback, but usually it's about firmness. This guest had a problem with geometry. He complained that the decorative square pillows on the bed were aerodynamically unsound for REM sleep. He wasn't even using them to sleep on. Their mere presence on the bed, he argued, disrupted the sleep feng shui and created a subtly hostile environment for his round head. He strongly recommended the host switch to pillows with a more rest-conducive circular shape. 46. Some guests inspect a property with the focus of a forensic scientist, and one man's target was the kitchen microwave. His complaint had nothing to do with its heating power or cleanliness. The problem was that the turntable rotated counterclockwise. He insisted this was fundamentally unnatural and violated the established principles of food rotation. He claimed that all his life microwaves had spun clockwise, and this deviation created a subtle but deeply unsettling culinary dissonance. He was genuinely arguing that heating food in this reverse direction might be negatively altering its molecular structure. 47. Some guests don't just review the property, they review the entire local population. A guest staying in a small town in Louisiana complained that the local accent was inconvenient and overly festive. She was annoyed that she had to focus intently to understand cashiers and waitstaff, and described the regional dialect as inefficient for clear communication. She suggested in her review that the host should provide a glossary of local slang. Are hosts now responsible for the linguistic evolution of their entire region? 48. Marketing terms can be tricky, apparently. A guest booked a room with a king-sized bed, only to complain later that it was a blatant case of false advertising. He wasn't arguing about the measurements. He was upset because the bed was, in his words, not large enough for an actual king in his entire royal court. He seemed to believe the term king size implied a bed of truly palatial medieval proportions, and felt ripped off by the standard 76-inch width. 49. Picture a serene lakeside cabin, the perfect getaway. But for one guest, the tranquility was shattered by the local dragonflies. Not because they were biting or swarming, but because his flight patterns were too erratic and purposeless. The guest filed an official complaint claiming the insects' chaotic movements were visually stressful. His proposed solution was for the host to somehow encourage the wildlife to fly in more orderly, predictable formations. Imagine trying to choreograph dragonflies for a 5-star review. 50. Having a great view is a major selling point. But for one guest, one great view wasn't enough. While he loved the panoramic ocean view from the living room, he was furious that the view from the small laundry room window was just of the neighbor's wall. He complained about the scenic inequality within the property, arguing that all windows, regardless of the room's purpose, should offer an equally spectacular vista. He was literally demanding picturesque laundry. 51. A guest staying in a mountain cabin with a huge panoramic sky view found a reason to be disappointed with the heavens themselves. Her complaint? The clouds were lazy and uninspired. She wrote in her review that for 3 straight days, the sky was filled with nothing but monotonous puffs of white, and she criticized their complete lack of artistic flair. She genuinely suggested that for a premium rental, the host should have somehow timed her stay for a period of more dramatic and photogenic cloud formations. 52. A host had a few framed photos on the wall, not of art, but of his own past travels to places like Thailand and Peru. This became the central issue for his guest. The guest complained that the photos depicted vacations that were clearly superior to the one he was currently on. He found it deeply demoralizing to be surrounded by evidence of the host's amazing adventures while he was just on a simple weekend trip. He described it as a subtle form of one-upmanship that tainted his entire stay. 53. The age-old debate: should the toilet paper hang over the roll or under it? For one guest, this wasn't a debate. It was grounds for war. He was absolutely incensed to find the toilet paper in the under position, which he described in his complaint as a fundamental violation of bathroom etiquette and a clear sign of a chaotic mind. He argued this single detail threw off the entire harmony of the room and was so distressing that he deserved a partial refund for the emotional turmoil it caused. 54. This next one sounds like it's from a science fiction movie. A guest claimed that time within the apartment moved at a slightly different speed than the outside world. He admitted the clocks were technically accurate, but he insisted that his own perception of hours and minutes felt warped and unreliable as soon as he stepped inside. He officially blamed the host for this temporal anomaly, which he said made it impossible to stick to his vacation schedule and caused him to be late for several appointments. 55. A guest staying in a luxury apartment in Denver, Colorado, was furious that there was no ocean view. Let me repeat that. Denver, a city over 1,000 miles from the nearest coastline. She argued that for the price she paid, a premium property should include all major natural attractions, regardless of geographical limitations. She was, in essence, complaining that the state of Colorado wasn't a coastal state and was demanding a refund from the host for it. So there we have it, a full-scale assault on logic, from paranoid squirrels to philosophically aggressive Wi-Fi passwords. It's a miracle anyone is still willing to rent out a spare room. They always say, the customer is always right. But these 55 stories prove that might be one of the most dangerous lies ever told. So here's my question for you, and I want you to be brutally honest. What is the single most infuriating, entitled, reality-defying complaint you've ever personally witnessed that proves that phrase is a complete myth? I want the story that made you lose all faith in customer sanity. If these tales of delusion made you feel a little more sane by comparison, prove it with a click on that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into glorious human absurdity.